This happened last week to my mom, and she told me about it as soon as she got home. It isn't as creepy as some other people's stories, but I wanted to share. My mom is 50 and enjoys walking dogs, both hers and other people's. She regularly walks large groups of dogs around a sort of nature reserve by the shore. It's a popular dog walking spot, so she often meets people there and has even made a few friends. The dogs that my mom walks are all very friendly. None of them are ever aggressive, even if other people's dogs are. My mom has 3 dogs of her own, a 2-year-old male and an 18-month-old female Rhodesian Ridgeback, and a 1-year-old male Cernico del Etna. I mentioned the breed so you can understand how big the Ridgebacks are and how small the Cernico is, as this will be relevant later. All 3 of my mom's dogs are entire, meaning they aren't neutered, because she likes to enter them into amateur dog shows. This means that when the female comes into season, Mom is forced to keep her separated from the other 2 and walk them separately. She also can't walk large groups of dogs because they get riled up with the presence of a flirty young bitch in heat. Getting to the day in question, my mom was walking only the 2 males, and nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Suddenly, she spotted a man walking towards her on the path with no dog. She called out to the dogs and got the Ridgeback on lead. Since despite how friendly he is, some people find it intimidating to have such a big dog run up to them, especially if they are not dog people. Unfortunately, the younger, less obedient Cernico did not obey and ran up to say hello to the man. Out of nowhere, the man yelled at my mom to get her filthy animals under control, and aimed a kick at the Cernico, but fortunately missed. My mom was completely taken aback by his sudden aggression, and tried to tell him that the dog is friendly, while at the same time trying to call him back to her. She was also now struggling to hold on to the Ridgeback, who was now pulling much harder than he normally does, trying to go towards the man. Meanwhile, the Cernico had started to bark at the man, who suddenly lunged forward and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. He lifted the now yelping dog up and proceeded to pull out a pocket knife. At this point, my mom ran forward to stop him. Her other dog was now barking and growling at the man and pulling at his lead. After they ran up to him, the man dropped the smaller dog and backed away, probably mostly due to the very big, very angry dog my mom had with her. My mom got right into the guy's face and yelled at him to not ever touch her dogs again. She then scooped up her cowering pup and hurried back to her car while the man yelled abuses at her until she was out of earshot. After she told me about this encounter, I asked her why she didn't call the police afterwards, and why she didn't let go of her Ridgeback and let him tear the guy's arm off. She said she wasn't thinking straight afterwards, and by the time she thought to call them, so much time had passed she didn't think there was any point. And she didn't let the other dog off of the leash, because if he had actually bitten the guy, he would probably have been taken away by the police and put down as a dangerous dog, which really infuriated me. This man was walking around a known dog walking area with no dog and a knife, threatening old ladies and their dogs, and yet the dog would be in trouble for protecting himself and his family? Anyway, it's been over a week now, and she hasn't seen him there again. So, dog-hating jerk? Let's not meet. Because if we do, I'm not a 50-year-old lady. So it won't end so well for you. I am a 25-year-old female and have been living with my boyfriend for the last 6 years. This was about 4 years ago. I was online a lot, and still am, and met a lot of cool people. Many had rough backstories, but I always offered a listening ear and tried to support them. I'm going to mention that I have autism and can be pretty naive, so don't recognize certain bad situations right away. I met a 24-year-old guy from Australia, I'm from Europe, who had just broken up with his girlfriend that he said was emotionally unstable, and it ended with her wanting to kill herself and him not being able to handle it anymore. I talked to him about it a lot and tried to help him cope with the situation. We started to game together online and I started to see him as a friend, but after a while, I started to notice that he was kinda acting like I was his girlfriend. I glanced over it, because he knew I had a boyfriend, and it might have been just kindness and I mistook it. I'm famous for being oblivious to that kind of stuff. He started to tell me that I should break up with my boyfriend, going on long tangents and writing me emails how my boyfriend was like his ex-girlfriend, that he abused me mentally and physically, that he was raping me, was making my life a living hell, and that he was going to kill me one day, which was all completely absurd, and I kept explaining that to him. After a while, it was obvious that he indeed thought of me as his new girlfriend. He made it clear we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, and that he would make sure of it. He was convinced that me telling him to stop and leave me alone was all orchestrated by my boyfriend, and I was actually being held hostage. Luckily, he didn't know my full name, or so I thought, or where I lived. I started getting messages from random accounts with pictures of people bloodied up saying, "This is going to happen," all with his name on the pages itself. This went on for a while. I begged him to stop, but he kept pushing. I had blocked him, but he kept making new accounts to get in contact with me. I decided to just delete my account on that site altogether and not go there anymore, and hoped it would go away. But then I suddenly started to get messages on Facebook. I never told him my full name, and even then I made sure my Facebook is extremely private with a family nickname, and I only had family members on there because most live far away. My boyfriend didn't even have a Facebook account, and like I said before, I kept my full name and location to myself. He made about 150 pages and profiles and completely directed to me with pictures of people killing themselves, telling me he was going to kill himself, complete with overlays and banners of "This is your fault." It seemed like he made this his full-time day job to send me messages on different platforms. He even found stuff like my YouTube account and followed me around there. Eventually, he started sending receipts of his school books that he had sold of his current school year, and later, one plane ticket to the airport where I actually live close to, and 2 back to Australia. He kept sending proof, like of him moving out of his apartment and putting his stuff in storage. He told me that he was coming to save me from my boyfriend, who had kept me hostage, and that he was going to kill him and take me back to Australia, so I could be safe. He had gotten rid of all ties he had, quit school, quit his job, so we could have a blank slate, telling me we'd have to live under the radar for a while. All the while he kept sending pictures as proof of these things, because he loved me and wanted to show it. By now, I had blocked every Facebook account with his, unfortunately, extremely common name, and basically deleted every other online account I had. Even though a lot were under different names, he found me everywhere. Eventually, the day came where he was taking pictures at the airport, which he was posting on my Facebook wall, and him in the plane of which logo I immediately recognized as my country's official airline. He began talking about the actual house I lived in, which was kind of a strange place to live. I lived on an industrial area in a maintenance apartment inside a huge empty building with only one other office. I was on the lease as a maintenance person, but that was purely for legal reasons because the owner thought he could make some money on the side. The whole building was open to me and there weren't any people living remotely nearby. He definitely couldn't have known I lived there. He started messaging about how perfect the whole setup was for his plans. My boyfriend was aware of everything that had happened by then, and thought it was best if maybe we'd sought out the help of police to give us some advice. But of course they couldn't do anything and just suggested that if we were scared we'd better just go somewhere else, and we decided to go stay at my parents'. We went back the next day since we both had school and work, but saw police cars in front of the building. The owner informed us that someone had broken in. This person had tried to go into the office next to our apartment, and they had an alarm system that went off and alerted the cops. At that point I wanted to know what the hell was going on and if he had tried to break in, since that was our first guess. It wasn't hard contacting him since he already sent me multiple messages on Facebook from several different accounts. My boyfriend contacted him and the guy agreed to have a webcam chat and when he turned his cam on, I immediately recognized a hallmark of our city from the window behind him. I silently freaked out, not letting known I was present. My boyfriend then spent more than 7 hours talking to him. The guy was furious and still certain my boyfriend was going to kill me, with nothing that could change his mind. After more than 7 hours with my normally monk-calm boyfriend getting pretty annoyed at this point because of the most stupid reasoning, the guy copy and pasted chat conversations and spin them all in crazy ways. The guy was saying he was disgusted and started to throw out profanities toward him about me, basically saying that if I was so adamant on staying with him, I deserved what my boyfriend was going to do to me, and he wouldn't warn me, because I had ruined his, my own, and our kids, and our life together. I only heard from him one more time after that. A short video of him being in the hospital saying he had tried to kill himself. It was my fault, and I was going to bring darkness over the earth instead of light, like you promised. He said stuff like that often, and other weird spiritual promises he said I made. I got scared again for a while, but I got silent after that. Even though it was years ago, I'm still afraid the guy isn't over me and will come after me. But as far as I know, his parents had locked him in a nursing home for the mentally ill. I got this info a year later when his older brother finally responded to my Facebook messages to me telling him to please speak to his brother because he was not okay. Stupid Facebook spam folder. Mr. Crazy Guy, please, let's not ever meet. This happened in the 90s, so long before this recent surge of clowns. I don't quite remember how old I was, but I must have been between 8 and 10. Me and a friend were outside playing around the group of neighborhoods that laid scattered around where we used to live. We were allowed to play over a pretty huge area, and on this day we had gone to the limits of that area, which was a bigger road with a bicycle path leading into the town near where we lived. The bicycle path and the road was only separated by a row of small concrete blocks that we stood on, and for some reason, we had decided to see if any cars would stop if we held out our thumbs as if we were trying to hitch a ride. Of course, no one did stop to pick two small boys up. As we were doing this, a man in his early 20s was walking along the bicycle path towards us, which is nothing strange as there are bus stops along the path, or just people walking into town, which is only 2 kilometers away. When he was right next to us, he stopped and laughed and shook his head and said, "That is not how you hitchhike." And right after saying this, he put down his duffel bag he was carrying and took out a quite expensive-looking scary clown mask and a large knife. Me and my friend didn't really have time to react as all this happened in just a few seconds. He proceeded to put the mask on and ran out on the road as a car came driving towards the town. He stood on the road right in the path of the car, so the car had to slam on its brakes and stop right in front of this crazy clown. The car had a driver and a passenger in the front seat, so the back seat was empty. As soon as the car had stopped for the clown, he put his empty hand on the hood and began running towards the back seat door on the passenger side while keeping his hand on the car. He opened the passenger door and jumped in, and before he could close the door, we just heard him yell, "Drive!" which the car did with their new scary passenger. Me and my friend just stood there confused and not really knowing what the hell we had just witnessed. This all happened maybe 30 seconds from the time he started talking to us, so it all happened very fast. No idea what happened to any of them after that. We told my parents, but they didn't believe us. I live in Southern Oregon, a beautiful place in the West filled with some of the most beautiful forests one will ever see. The national forest that I live against I know like the back of my hand. I know stories from long ago about places in the middle of nowhere that have strange names, and that often draws me to these places to explore and feel nostalgic. These forests also have things about them that are off. Locals talk about how people disappear all the time in the woods, sometimes over drugs, sometimes over foul play, and other times people just go for a hunt or a hike and are never seen again. Disappear without a trace. I have spent years in the deep wilderness hiking, almost every day. The incident I'm about to tell you changed how I felt about the forest. My roommate and I left our home on the outskirts of the forest for a hike at a place that is basically a swamp flat, a small area of marshy swamp in a bowl-like canyon high up in the mountains. There's one road in and one road out. As we climbed the mountain, the rain had started to pick up. It had been mostly drizzle that day, but living in the Pacific Northwest, you get used to that, and it doesn't stop you from adventure. We finally get to the flats and it's time to explore. We walk the trail into the flats, and as we admire the old growth trees surrounding the marsh, the wind starts to pick up. There was a nasty storm coming in. The trees started to rock back and forth and make horrible snapping sounds, and there isn't many safe places in a forest like this to take shelter from falling trees and branches, so we decided it was time to hike out. We hiked back to the car and were relieved to get in it and out of the storm. The car was parked in a small turnout on the side of the road. We sat there for a few moments in the car, taking off our jackets and turning the heat on and such. That's when the truck pulled up. In the middle of the bad storm, in the complete middle of nowhere, a really old beat-up pickup truck drives up and parks in front of our car. Not completely blocking the car, but coming damn near close. A burly man steps out of the driver's seat and turns and looks at us. I have to say, this is the only time in my entire life that I have thought to myself, something here isn't right. The look on this guy's face gave me that instinctual feeling of fight or flight. As we watch him walk around his truck, I tell my roommate, "Go, just go, start the car and leave, now." As he starts the car and begins to pull off, the man was reaching behind the seat of his truck and pulls out a long rifle. That's when my roommate hit the gas and flew out of there. As we pull away, the man pulls the gun out and points it in our direction and looks me right in the eyes. The feeling I got was, "You are going to die today." I will never, ever forget that look on his face. We got home, told our neighbors about the incident, and proceeded about our day. When we got into the car the next morning to drive to town, the starter failed on the car. I often think to myself, had it failed up there? Or had that bad storm not come in and shoot us away? Things could very well have gone south that day. This happened to me 2 years ago. It was my first month on the job, and I worked night security at this pretty interesting place. For the record, I still work there and have more strange stories possibly to tell in the future. I am a 38-year-old male. I've worked security jobs most of my life, in the graveyard shift. I was an event security guard for various well-known concert venues for years, so I've seen my fair share of strange things and crazy people. In other words, I don't scare easily, and hardly ever go into a panic mode when a crisis comes up. The place I currently work is a resort-style apartment complex. To get the layout, there are 3 floors of apartments with 50 units on each floor. This place takes up one city block with a golf course in the back, indoor swimming pools, hot tubs, and a small movie theater. You name it, this place has it. Most of the residents are retired doctors, lawyers, and otherwise rich. There are some younger people that live here as well. Stockbrokers and real estate agents and so on. Some just use their apartment in the summer and leave as soon as the snow falls. It is located in a well-known tourist town in the United States. The building itself has 12 exits on the first floor. The doors are locked at 11 p.m. You can exit, but you can't get back in unless you go to the front of the building and ask to be buzzed in, or pick up the call box phone next to whatever exit you are at. It will ring the company's cell phone, and I answer and can come and let you in. The front lobby is set up much like a hotel, with sliding glass doors which I lock when I start my shift. In the middle of the building on the first floor are 2 big slider doors which I also lock. They lead to the private parking lot. The parking lot itself is gated and you need a code to get in. This was midsummer, and while it's never really hot here, tonight was an exception. It was still very warm after the sun had set. I came in 10 minutes to 11 to start my shift. We had a routine to hand off the keys, event log, and phone to the next person on duty. Despite its size, I'm the only security person here at night. My coworker who is leaving told me the side iron gates that lead into the parking lot are open on one side because they are stuck. This is nothing new and they often do get jammed. She told me the repair people would be in tomorrow sometime to fix them, but to just do some extra patrol out there tonight. This place sits across the road from a public park, and while the area is pretty decent, the park tends to breed druggies and homeless at night who sometimes like to try to wander on the property or cause trouble. My night started out as uneventful. As a security guard in this place, we only have pepper spray, a large flashlight, keys, and a company cell phone to call 911 if need be. We are told not to confront with bodily harm, nor can we detain anyone. We are simply eyes and ears and to call the police if something comes up. Of course you could defend yourself if you need to, but in all cases if you are in danger, call the police is the company policy. Basically, I am to walk the grounds and the floors for anyone suspicious, watch the cameras in the security office, which is in the lobby, and otherwise try to stay alert. If a resident calls for a maintenance request, I would take the information down in the computer for day shift, or if a resident called with a security issue, I would attend to it. Pretty easy enough job, I thought. I locked the doors to the parking lot and the lobby doors. I did a sweep of all the floors and found myself back at the desk. It was really quiet and it rolled around 3 a.m. I had just sat down to eat my lunch when the company cell phone rang. The caller ID let me know it was from one of our outside call box phones. I picked it up and said, "Thanks for calling, resort name here. This is Security Officer James. How can I help you?" All I heard was someone breathing heavy. I glanced at the cameras and could just see the shadow of a figure standing just out of reach from the door in the camera view. All I could see is the open call box and the metal cord from the phone. I asked again how I could help. The man started to breathe heavier and laugh, then silence. It was one of those laughs you hear in a movie when the lunatic is about to do something terrible. I got up from my chair and started to walk out of the office and to the door he was at when it rang again. This time from call box number 2, which was further down. I quickly looked at the camera and seen this large figure in a hooded jacket. I knew this was strange as it was very warm outside. He was holding a black bag in his hands but had his back to the camera.
"I'm coming for you, and you're gonna die,"
this voice said in a raspy, deep tone. He hung up before I had the chance to say anything. Then the phone rang again. This time I picked up, and before he could speak, I let him know the cops are on the way, and to leave the property now as he is on camera. He tried the doors and both were locked. This time he was at yet another call box. This guy had to be running at top speed to make it to the next and the next call box, as they were a good distance between doors on the outside.
"I can see you. Are you ready to die? The cops won't make it here in time,"
the guy said. I spoke loud and pretended like I was talking to another security officer and asked him to send 3 other security guards to such and such location, and that the police are dispatched. The guy slammed the phone down loud against the call box receiver, and I watched him on camera take off into the darkness to the park. I figured it scared him off. I was going to call the police, but honestly the location of this place, it would take them at least 15 minutes to get here, and I figured this guy was just some tweaker from the park. I scanned the cameras and walked the back lot just to make sure no one was there. I had my pepper spray in my hands just in case, but no one was out there. I returned to my desk and wrote what happened in the incident log. About a half hour passed. I had just finished lunch, and just was about to do rounds when the phone rang again. This time, it was from an unknown number. I thought it would be a resident calling about a repair issue or something. I picked up and said the normal line.
"Where are the cops? I don't see them, but I see you,"
the voice said. Fuck, it was that guy again. I scanned the cameras and did not see anything. I went to the front door to look out and there was nothing but darkness and a few front floodlights on.
"I know you're alone, and you're going to die soon,"
he said. I basically told him to get fucked and hung up. I called the non-emergency number to 911 and let them know what was going on. The dispatcher said she would send out a car to check the area and make contact with me. Next thing I hear is a loud thud against the glass windows to the day manager's office, which sits across from the security room. Another 3 loud bangs. I run to the door and unlock it. I pull up the shades and shine my flashlight through the window into the darkness. I catch the face of this hooded man. He looked to be about 40, with long stringy hair poking down these wild eyes. He looked right at me and grinned before slamming his head into the window to try and break it. I started yelling at him and told him that the cops are coming in to get the fuck out of here. That's when he pulled the biggest damn butcher knife I've ever seen and made a slicing motion like he would use it to cut my throat. This guy was crazy and probably on drugs. He continued slamming his body against the glass to try to break it. He used his head to try to break the window but managed to bust his head open, so the window now has blood all over it. I backed out of the office and locked the door to it. I then decided to wait for cops as this guy was out of control and my pepper spray wasn't going to stop him, and the last thing I wanted to handle was a bloody crazy person. He then ran to the nearest side door and took the call box phone off the hook. He then ran to each call box and removed all the phones which caused my company's cell phone to ring and jam up the line. This guy had to be on meth or something because he ran as fast as I could imagine. I watched the camera and noticed to my horror that the sliding door to the garage was open. Now, it was common for residents to go out to their cars and unlock the door themselves. It's just a sliding lock, like the kind in department stores, but this is the last thing I need with this nut job running around. I sprinted across the building and took a shortcut through a couple of banquet rooms to make it to the garage. As I was doing so, I saw that crazy guy running up the garage pathway. I slid that door as fast as I could and locked it before he got into the entryway. He then slammed his body into the glass, over and over, but the door did not move. I locked the second set of doors in case he got through the outside ones. He would at least be trapped or slow him down. I reached for my pepper spray, thinking maybe he would just leave, and yelled the cops are here. He started to laugh and howl, and then held up that knife again before running into the darkness of the parking garages. I called the cops on my personal cell phone to let them know the man has a knife. The dispatcher told me that the cops will be there shortly, and I let her know what happened. I made my way to the front again and locked myself in the security office. At least this place had no windows, and I could watch on camera. I heard another loud thud and bang and realized he was at the front lobby doors trying to get in. I was hoping the cops would roll up at any minute, but they didn't. And while it probably didn't take them long, it felt like forever at this point. The guy was standing at the lobby doors with the knife in hand. He faced the camera and by this time his hood had fallen back. He was bald-headed with wild, long, stringy, crazy hair on the sides of his head. His eyes were huge and I will never forget that grin on his face as he mouthed to the camera, "Die, die," while making stabbing motions with that knife. Blood running across his face from slamming into the glass as he ran out into the darkness. About 5 minutes later, the cops show up. They sent one officer. He asked me what the guy looked like and I told him I have camera footage. He drove through the area first and shined a spotlight. The cop returned to tell me he couldn't find anyone, and he had driven around the entire block and back behind the golf course. I showed him the footage and printed out a picture from the camera. The cop said he didn't see any sign of the guy, and that he would patrol the area and to call back if he came again. Now it was nearly 5 a.m. when the cop left. I waited until 6 a.m., when it was daylight and people were starting to get out and about before I walked around and hung up all the phones from the call boxes. This guy literally took all 12 phones off the hook. When my manager came in during the morning shift at 8 a.m., I told her what happened and she said that they would keep an eye out and have a meeting to let everyone who worked there know and to be aware. They had an extra security guard on my shift for 2 weeks after, but the guy never returned. The cops never found the guy or who he was. So, crazy bloody guy with the knife, let's not meet again.